Book of Heaven, Volume 12, Part 12. March 22nd, 1919. All things came out to life from the eternal Fiat. Excesses of love in the creation of man. As I was in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, and I could see all the order of created things. And my sweet Jesus told me, "My daughter, see what harmony, what order in all created things, and how all of them came out to life from the eternal Fiat. So everything cost me one Fiat. The littlest star, just as the refulgent and splendid sun, the littlest plant, just as the great tree, the small insect, just as the largest animal. They seem to say among themselves, 'We are noble creatures. Our origin is the eternal volition. We all have the mark of the supreme Fiat. It is true that we are distinct and different among ourselves. We have diversity of office, of light, of heat. But this says nothing. One is our value, the Fiat of a God. One our life and preservation, the Fiat of the eternal majesty." Oh, how eloquently creation speaks of the power of my will, and teaches that from the greatest thing to the smallest, one is the value, because they have life from the divine volition. In fact, a star would say to the sun, "It is true that you have much light and heat. Your office is great, your goods immense. The earth almost depends on you, so much so that I do nothing in comparison to you. But the Fiat of a God made you so. Therefore our value is equal. The glory that we give to our Creator is fully similar." Then he added with a more afflicted tone, "It was not so in creating man. It is true that his origin is my Fiat, but this was not enough for me. Taken by excess of love, I breathed on him, wanting to infuse in him my very life. I endowed him with reason, I made him free, and I constituted him king of all creation. But man, ungrateful, how did he correspond to me? Amid all creation, he alone has rendered himself the sorrow of my heart, the clashing note. And then what to tell you about my crafting in the sanctification of souls? Not just one Fiat, not just my breath do I place at their disposal, but my very life, my love, my wisdom. Yet how many rejections, how many defeats does my love receive? Ah, my daughter, compassionate my hard sorrow, and come into my will to substitute for the love of the whole human family, so as to soothe my pierced heart. April 7th, 1919. Effects of the divine will. Threats of chastisements. Continuing in my usual state, my sweet Jesus came, all tired, in act of asking for my help, and leaning his heart upon mine, he made me feel his pains. Each pain that I felt was capable of giving me death, but Jesus, sustaining me, gave me the strength not to die. Then looking at me, he told me, "My daughter, patience. In certain days, more than ever, your pains are necessary to me. so that the world may not turn all into one flame. Therefore I want to make you suffer more." And with a lance that he had in his hand, he ripped my heart open. I suffered very much, but I felt happy, thinking that Jesus was sharing his pains with me, and pouring himself out with me. He could spare the peoples the imminent and terrible scourges that shall break out. Then, after some hours of intense pains, my lovable Jesus told me, "My beloved daughter, you suffer very much. Come then into my will to take refreshment, and let us pray together for poor humanity." I don't know how. I found myself in the immensity of the divine volition, in the arms of Jesus. And he, as though in a low voice, was speaking, and I repeated after him. I shall give some idea of what he was saying, because it is impossible for me to say everything. I remember that in the will of Jesus, I could see all the thoughts of Jesus, all the good he had done to us with his intelligence, and how all human intelligences received life from his mind. But, oh God, what an abuse they made! How many offenses! And I said, "Jesus, I multiply my thoughts in your will, to give to each one of your thoughts a kiss of a divine thought, an adoration, a recognition of you, a reparation, a love of divine thoughts, as if another Jesus were doing it. And this in the name of all, and for all the human thoughts, past, present, and future. And I intend to compensate even for the intelligences of lost souls. I want that the glory of all creatures be complete, and that no one miss the roll call. And what they do not do, I do in your will, to give you divine and complete glory." Then, looking at me, Jesus was waiting, as if he wanted a reparation to his eyes. And I said, "Jesus, I multiply myself in your gazes, so that I too may have as many gazes for as many times as you have gazed upon the creature with love. In your tears, so that I too may cry for all the sins of creatures, to be able to give you, in the name of all, gazes of divine love and divine tears, to give you complete glory and reparation for all the gazes of all creatures." Then Jesus wanted me to continue the reparations to everything, to his mouth, to his heart, to his desires, and so forth, multiplying everything in his will, such that it would be too long for me to say everything. Therefore I move forward. Then Jesus added, "My daughter, as you were doing the acts in my will, many suns were formed between heaven and earth, and I look at the earth through these suns. Otherwise the earth would be so disgusting to me that I would not be able to look at it. But the earth receives little of these suns, because the darkness that they, the creatures, spread is such that as it comes up against these suns, they can receive neither all the light nor the heat." Afterwards he transported me into the midst of creatures, but who can say what they were doing? I shall only say that my Jesus, with sorrowful tone, added, "What disorder in the world! But this disorder is because of the leaders. both civilian and ecclesiastical. Their self-interested and corrupted lives did not have the strength to correct their subjects. Therefore they closed their eyes over the evils of the members, since they already showed their own evils. And if they did correct them, it was all in a superficial way, because not having the life of that good within themselves, how could they infuse it in others? And how many times these perverted leaders have placed the evil before the good, to the point that the few good have remained shaken by this acting of the leaders. Therefore, I shall have the leaders struck in a special way. And I, Jesus, spare the leaders of the church. They are already few. If you strike them, the rulers shall be lacking. And Jesus, don't you remember that I founded my church with 12 apostles? In the same way, those few who shall remain shall be enough to reform the world. The enemy is already at their doors. The revolutions are already in the field. The nations shall swim in blood. The leaders shall be dispersed. Pray, pray and suffer, so that the enemy may not have the freedom to reduce everything to ruin. April 15th, 1919. Major things are done after minor ones, and are the fulfillment and crowning of those. The resurrected humanity of Jesus, symbol of those who shall live in the divine will. I was fusing myself in the holy will of my always lovable Jesus, and together with my Jesus, my intelligence was wandering in the work of creation, adoring and thanking the Supreme Majesty for everything and for everyone. And my Jesus, all affability, told me, "My daughter, in creating the heavens, first I created the stars as minor spheres, and then I created the sun, major sphere, endowing it with such light as to eclipse all the stars, as though hiding them within itself, constituting it king of the stars and of all nature. It is my usual way to do minor things first, as preparation for major ones, and these as crowning of the minor things. The sun, while being my relator, also veils the souls who shall form their sanctity in my will. The saints who lived in the mirror of my humanity, and as though in the shadow of my will, shall be the stars. The former souls, though later in time, shall be the suns. I maintained this order also in redemption. My birth was without clamor. On the contrary, it was neglected. My childhood was without splendor of great things before men. My life in Nazareth was so hidden that I lived as if ignored by all. I adapted myself to do the littlest and most common things of the human life. During my public life, there were a few things that were great, but still, who knew my divinity? No one, not even all the apostles. I passed through the crowds like any other man, so much so that anyone could come close to me, talk to me, and if needed, even despise me. And I, interrupting the speaking of Jesus, said, "Jesus, my love, how happy those times were, and happier those people who, by just wanting it, could come close to you, talk to you, and be with you." And Jesus, "Ah, my daughter, only my will brings true happiness. It alone encloses all goods in the soul, and making itself crown around the soul, it constitutes her queen of true happiness. Only these souls shall be the queens of my throne, because they are a birth from my will. This is so true that those people were not happy. Many saw me, but did not know me, because my will did not reside within them as center of life. Therefore, even if they saw me, they remained unhappy. And only those who received the good of receiving the seed of my will in their hearts disposed themselves to receive the good of seeing me resurrected. Now, the portent of my redemption was the resurrection, that more than refulgent sun crowned my humanity, making even my littlest acts shine with such splendor and marvel as to make heaven and earth to be astonished. It shall be the beginning, the foundation, and the fulfillment of all goods, crown and glory of all the blessed. My resurrection is the true sun that worthily glorifies my humanity. It is the sun of the Catholic religion. It is the glory of every Christian. Without the resurrection, it would have been as though heavens without sun, without heat, and without life. Now, my resurrection is symbol of the souls who shall form their sanctity in my will. The saints of these past centuries are symbols of my humanity. Although resigned, they did not have continuous attitude in my will. Therefore they did not receive the mark of the sun of my resurrection, but the mark of the works of my humanity before my resurrection. Therefore they shall be many. Almost like stars, they shall form for me a beautiful ornament to the heaven of my humanity. But the saints of the living in my will, who shall symbolize my resurrected humanity, shall be few. In fact, many throngs and crowds of people saw my humanity before its death, but few saw my resurrected humanity. Only the believers, those who were most disposed, and I could say only those who contained the seed of my will. In fact, if they did not have it, they would have lacked the necessary sight to be able to see my resurrected and glorious humanity, and therefore be spectators of my ascent into heaven. Now, if my resurrection symbolizes the saints of the living in my will, and this with reason, because each act, word, step, and so forth, done in my will, is a divine resurrection that the soul receives. It is a mark of glory that she undergoes. It is to go out of herself in order to enter the divinity, and to hide within the refulgent sun of my volition. And in it, she loves, works, thinks. What is the wonder if the soul remains fully risen and identified with the very sun of my glory, and symbolizes my resurrected humanity? But few are those who dispose themselves to this, because souls, even in sanctity, want something of their own good, while the sanctity of living in my will has nothing of its own, but everything is of God. And in order for souls to dispose themselves to this, to stripping themselves of their own goods, it takes too much. Therefore they shall not be many. You are not in the number of the many, but of the few. Therefore, be always attentive to the call, and to your continuous flight. April 19th, 1919. Jesus did for each soul everything that they were obliged to do toward their Creator. Continuing in my usual state, I felt all afflicted, and my always lovable Jesus, on coming, clasped me, and surrounding my neck with his arm, told me, "My daughter, what's wrong? Your affliction weighs upon my heart, and pierces me more than my own pains. Poor daughter, you have compassionated me many times, and have taken my pains upon yourself. Now I want to compassionate you, and take your pain myself." And he clasped me all to his heart, and drawing me outside of myself, he added, "Cheer up, my daughter, come into my will to be able to better comprehend and see what my humanity did for the good of creatures." I don't know how to say what I comprehended. In many things I lack the words. I shall just say what my sweet Jesus told me. "My daughter, my humanity was the sole organ that reordered the harmony between creator and creature. I did for each soul all that they were obliged to do toward their creator, not excluding even the very lost souls, because for all created things I was to give to the Father complete glory, love, and satisfaction, with this difference only, that for the souls who somehow fulfill their duties toward the Creator, as almost no one arrives at satisfying them all, their glory unites to mine, and everything they do remains as though grafted in mine, while the lost ones remain as though parched members, that, lacking the vital humors, are not fit for receiving any graft of the good I have done for them, but are only fit for burning in the eternal fire. So my humanity restored the lost harmony between creatures and Creator, and sealed it at the price of blood and unheard of pains." May 4th, 1919. Jesus has his throne on earth in the one who lives in his will. I live amid privations and bitternesses. Only the will of my Jesus is my soul's strength and life. So my sweet Jesus made himself seen in my interior for a little while, all afflicted and pensive, sustaining his forehead with his own hand. In seeing him so afflicted, I said to him, "Jesus, what's wrong? So afflicted and pensive?" And he, looking at me, told me, "Ah, daughter, from within your heart, I am allotting the destiny of the world. Your heart is the center of my throne upon earth, and from my center I look at the world, the madness of creatures, the precipice that they are preparing, while I am as though put aside, as if I were nothing for them. And I am forced to withdraw the light, not only of grace, but also of their very natural reason, to confound them and make them touch with their own hands who man is, and what man can do. And from within your heart I look at him, and I cry and pray for the ungrateful man. And I want you together with me, crying and praying, and suffering for my relief and company. And I, my poor Jesus, how much compassion I feel for you. Ah, yes, I shall cry and pray together with you. But tell me, my love, how is it possible that my heart be the center of your throne upon earth, while there are so many good souls in whom you dwell, while I am so bad?" And he added, "In heaven also I have the center of my throne, while I am the life of each blessed. And by being life of each blessed, I do not exclude that I have a throne in which all my majesty, my omnipotence, immensity, Beauty, wisdom, and so forth reside as in the central point, since each blessed cannot contain me, not having the capacity of containing all the immensity of my being. In the same way on earth I have my center. While I dwell in others, I have my central point from which I decide, I command, I operate, I do good, I chastise, that I do not do in the other dwellings. And do you know why I have chosen you as the central place? Because I have chosen you to live life in my will. And the one who lives in my will is capable of containing me completely, as my central point, because she lives in the center of my being, and I live in the center of hers. But while I live in her center, I live as if I were in my own center. On the other hand, one who does not live in my will cannot embrace me completely. Therefore, at the most, I can dwell there, but not erect my throne. Ah, if all understood the great good of living in my will, they would compete. But alas, how few of them understand it, and they live more in themselves than in me. May 8th, 1919. Cause and necessity of the pains that the divinity gave to the humanity of Jesus. The reason why he has delayed in making them known. Finding myself in my usual state, I was thinking about the pains of my adorable Jesus, especially those that the divinity made the most holy humanity of our Lord suffer. Meanwhile, I felt myself being drawn inside the heart of my Jesus, and I took part in the pains of his most holy heart, that the divinity made him suffer during the course of his life upon earth. These pains are quite different from those that blessed Jesus suffered in the course of his passion from the hands of the Jews. They are pains that almost cannot be described. From the little I shared in them, I can say that I felt a sharp, bitter pain, accompanied by a tearing of the heart itself, such that I felt myself dying in reality. And then Jesus, almost with a prodigy of his love, gave me life again. Then, after I suffered, my sweet Jesus told me, "Daughter of my pains, know that the pains that the Jews gave me were the shadow of those that the divinity gave me. And this was just, in order to receive full satisfaction. Man, in sinning, offends the Supreme Majesty, not only externally, but also internally, and he disfigures in his interior the divine part that was infused in him when he was created. So, sin is formed first in the interior of man, and then comes outside. Even more, many times what comes outside is the minimum part. The greatest remains in the interior. Now, creatures were incapable of penetrating into my interior and making me satisfy, through pains, the glory of the Father that they had denied to him with so many offenses of their interior. More so since these offenses wounded the noblest part of the creature, that is, the intellect, the memory, and the will, in which the divine image is imprinted. Who, then, was to take on this commitment if the creature was incapable? Therefore, it was almost necessary that the very divinity would take on this commitment and act as my loving executioner, and though loving, more demanding, in order to receive full satisfaction for all the sins committed in the interior of man. The divinity wanted the complete work and the full satisfaction of the creature, both of the interior and of the exterior. So in the passion that the Jews gave me, I satisfied the external glory of the Father that creatures had taken away from him. In the passion that the divinity gave me, during the whole course of my life, I satisfied the Father for all the sins of the interior of man. From this you can comprehend how the pains that I suffered from the hands of the divinity surpassed by far the pains that creatures gave me. Even more, they almost cannot be compared, and they are less accessible to the human mind. Just as there is great difference between the interior and the exterior of man, much greater is the difference between the pains that the divinity inflicted upon me and those that creatures gave me on the last day of my life. The first ones were cruel tearings, superhuman pains, capable of giving me death, and repeated deaths in the inmost parts, both of the soul and of the body. Not even a fiber was spared me. The second were bitter pains, but not tearings capable of giving me death at each pain. But the divinity had the power and the will to do so. Ah, how much man costs me! But man, ungrateful, does not care about me, and does not try to comprehend how much I have loved him and suffered for him. So much so that he has not even come to understand all that I suffered in the passion that creatures gave me. And if they do not understand the lesser, how can they understand the greater, that I suffered for them? This is why I delay in revealing the innumerable and unheard of pains that the divinity gave me because of them. But my love wants outpouring and requital of love. Therefore I call you, in the immensity and height of my will, where all these pains are in act. And not only do you take part in them, but in the name of the whole human family you honor them and give them requital of love. And together with me, you substitute for all that creatures owe. But to my highest sorrow, and to greatest harm for themselves, they do not give it a thought. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 12, Part 12. Fiat.